Hello and welcome back to another Last of Us review, and today we'll be reviewing episode 4 of season 1, and this is the episode where we meet the show's version of the Hunters. And the first big win about this episode, there is no flashback, there is no 2003 part. Yet again, I really don't like those parts. We get more time with Joel and Ellie, which I really like, because I feel like this show has been really lacking that dynamic. So episode 4 is the first time we actually get to see those characters by themselves and have them be the focus of the episode. Episode 4 is about our characters on the road from Bill's place trying to get to Tommy and end up in Kansas City and getting tied up with everything to do with the Hunters. This is adapting the first half of the Pittsburgh part of the game up until when they meet Henry and Sam. And this episode really streamlines this story quite a lot, to the point where I don't really enjoy it as much as the game. I feel like they should have maybe had more time in Kansas City. I also don't know why they changed it from Pittsburgh to Kansas City. It's one of those few little changes like 2003 instead of 2013. It seems like they're changing things for the sake of it, and this is another case where I felt like they did. I definitely feel like the first maybe 20 minutes they were dragging their feet a little in this episode. This episode doesn't really get to Kansas City, which is the main point of this episode, until almost 20 minutes into this episode, and this is already a very short episode compared to all the other episodes we've had so far. We do get some very iconic scenes with them on the journey, like the scenes which are ripped straight out of the game for shot, where Joel and Ellie find the old music, exact same song, Joel saying this is before my time, and Ellie finding Bill's dirty book, all exactly the same, which is very good. I just feel like maybe they could have cut out the camping part of this travel bit and got to Kansas City faster, because about the halfway point is where we get the iconic Hunter attack scene, and it is not very good in the show. I have to admit that. It is way more cinematic and better in the game as it is in the show. The show just feels very underwhelming. 3 guys attack them. That is it. And then they decide to merge in the hotel part of the game into this ambush scene, because they've already adapted the hotel shots in episode 2, so they're very heavily remixing this Pittsburgh part of the story. And then they decide, okay, the part where Ellie saves Joel is going to happen here, not later on. And because Ellie saves Joel, they then rush the Joel trusting Ellie with a gun scene, and it feels very not earned. In the game, this whole thing happens because they get to a point where the Hunters know they're around and they're out in force, and Joel realizes that he can't take them on by himself. He needs to rely on Ellie to protect him, and that is when he gives Ellie a gun, and then he apologizes to Ellie because he shouted at Ellie for saving him originally. In the show, he never apologizes. He never's mad at Ellie. What happens is Ellie's a bit sad that she killed a guy. Joel blames himself, be like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't good enough, and then gives her the gun. It just feels not worth it. Maybe if they could have held off on the gun being given back a bit longer, maybe for episode 5 when they're in dire circumstances, he finally trusts Ellie with the gun. I feel like that was a bit weak, Ryan, and they're just kind of rushing through these major story plots and just kind of crowd them all together, being like, this will happen, and it's just way too streamlined for my liking. I just really thought they could have done better with the Hunters, and instead they just disappointed me with this shoddy writing at times and an episode that feels way too short for the story and content it's trying to adapt. I also was not a fan that they decided to go and give the Hunters a backstory. I don't even know if they're even going to call them Hunters in the show, because they seem to be not all bad. They seem to just be people that rebelled against Fedra, and now they're like, what do we do now? There seems like just people with just no law and no structure, where in the game they're just straight out villains, so maybe they're trying to humanize the Hunters a little more. And then they decide to connect Henry and Sam to these not Hunters, and I was like, why? Like, why are they doing that? It just seems a little weird. They're just changing things because they can, and I wasn't a fan of it, and they definitely should have done this, because they're taking away from Joel and Ellie, giving screen time to this random woman, which I don't know her name of. She's a leader of these Hunters, and they're like, okay, we're going to focus on the Hunters. I know they're trying to make the world seem more alive, but I don't care about the Hunters. They're only meant to be in 2 episodes. What's the point of taking away from Joel and Ellie to give it to some show exclusive characters that we do not care about? The only good thing about the Hunters subplot is the foreshadowing to the bloaters that we will hopefully see in episode 5, and maybe one more episode. I hope the bloaters are not a one and done enemy. So that's the best thing. I just felt like the writing was very underwhelming and very weak this episode, and I expected way better after episode 2 and episode 3. Coming to this episode, they were like, we're going to make this as short as possible. The pacing's all over the place. It's going to be very slow at the start, and then they're just going to rush through as much of this Pittsburgh part of the story as quickly as possible and just merge a bunch of scenes together and make scenes that don't really work in the moment happen just because they want to speed through it. So the pacing's all over the place, and I just felt the writing was very weak. I am being very negative. Let's talk about some positives. First of all, it looks great. It has a nice city setting, and with a lot of shows, they have a bad habit of just being like, it's in the woods to make it cheaper. But no, it looks gorgeous. We have a very, very pretty episode and some amazing sets that feel ripped straight out of The Last of Us. The acting is good all around. I really, really like Pedro Pascal's performance as Joel. There's the little things that really, really make Joel feel alive, and he's really performing him very well. I do have a bit of critiques with the Hunter woman. I just feel like there are some emotional scenes that she was a bit flat on, is all. She just felt a bit flatter than people around her, is all. This episode really underwhelmed me overall, but it is really propped up by the little things, like the little moments where Joel is suffering because Ellie's trying to make him laugh with her little joke book, and it just shows them slowly bonding, and by the end of the episode, Ellie manages her little quest to make Joel laugh, and the two, before they go to sleep, they just break down laughing. I really, really like those wholesome moments, and we're actually starting to see those characters coming together, and the chemistry between them is absolutely fantastic. The ending itself, I felt was a little rushed with them suddenly being ambushed by Henry and Sam. I felt like they could have done a bit better with that. I just didn't really like the absolute final moment. Maybe they should have saved the ambush for the start of next episode and left this episode on a wholesome moment. Another little thing which I really, really like about this episode is this episode really hammers home that Joel is getting old and his body's starting to fail him. Like, he is unable to get to the top of a building because his knees can't really do that anymore. So he makes it most of the way. Or that because of 20 years of shooting guns and surviving and taking damage and just getting older generally, he's lost most of the hearing in his right ear. So people can jump him easily because he can't really hear them anymore. And you see little things like that, like in episode 2, he didn't hear the clicker sneaking up on him because he had his left ear covered. And at the start of this episode, we see him sleeping on his right side so he can use his left ear to hear things. It's just all these little things which make Joel feel like an everyday, realistic character and not the action hero that he feels like in the game. Now that's me one type one sentence, that's one over review, and I would have to say this is just an enjoyable episode. It is a fine episode and a 6 out of 10. I can't justify giving it any more than a 6 really, just because I feel like it is paced very badly. It should have maybe been a bit longer, and the writing's a bit shoddy at times. But this episode is just really carried by those little moments between Joel and Ellie. But please tell me down below, what are your thoughts and opinions on episode 4? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And what would you rank it out of 10? But this is it for today, so make sure to like and subscribe to help out the channel and to keep up to date with all content. So goodbye, peace out, and I'll see you in the next video.